When I read his manifesto, it was a very cogent, very racist, very anti-Semitic, but very cogent explanation of why he thinks black people are inferior, Jewish people are inferior, a little bit like a small short paragraph on Asians and Arabs, but that, you know, there's a white genocide that he perceives to be in place because of replacement theory, and that he needs to go and even the playing field by killing black people. Like, how do you prevent that kind of radicalization from happening? I'd love to hear that kind of a conversation.
You know, a lot of times I think crazy people don't seem crazy. So I think it's easy to kind of look at things like this and then to say, well, this guy didn't sound crazy, even though I think a lot of that document was copy and paste. I don't think a lot of it actually came from him. But crazy people are oftentimes able to come across as not crazy. The issue was that when you actually look at all of his ideas, a lot of them contradicted one another. Like when he was saying what his political ideology was, he was claiming that he was, you know, had spent many, many years as a communist and then moved a bit more to the right from communism, and has moved into eco-fascist nationalism, socialism.
Not inconsistent. A lot of people's ideology shift. We're going through a great shift as a whole nation right now, as so many people feel abandoned by both parties, and people are all over the map and changing. You know, Elon Musk just said that he's shifting from voting Democratic historically to voting Republican. I don't think that's a sign of someone being deranged.
Well, except this person says in the same one document says, you know, leftism leads to degenerate society, and conservatism is like synonymous with corporatism, and
he's calling out establishment politics. He's taking a line that a lot of, you know, conservative populists are taking, which is a dissatisfaction with both corporate parties, and saying, you know, Republican conservatism is a problem and leftism is a problem. I'm charting my own path. I mean, I frankly think that's really in line with, frankly, what a lot of Americans are feeling right now, which is what is so troubling to me about reading the document.
Yeah. When I did reporting on sort of the alt-right a few years ago, I went to some of the rallies they had in D.C. to speak to, you know, what brings you to this kind of ideology, this event. It seemed like it was a 33% breakdown, basically, between people who were, so the first category is people who were almost racist from birth, like they had parents or grandparents who would have been in the KKK, like white racism was sort of baked into their family experience. And then there was another group of people who were sort of, this guy is kind of straddling the latter two categories, people who were radicalized online, but it was like irony first. It was trolling the libs kind of thing, and then it's like they're pretending I don't really think this. I'm just trying to trigger you. But if you do that for long enough, then eventually you do. It's not ironic anymore. You just do have those ideas. And then there's a third group that is just looking for the most extreme thing to kind of to try to wring some meaning out of a really miserable antisocial existence. A person who could have done Occupy Wall Street, and then, well, they're not radical enough. Eco-terrorism. Well, they're not radical enough. You know, what is the alt-right's ideas? Like, they could have joined ISIS. They're just looking for some crazy thing to shake up, because their lives are miserable and they're unhappy and they're mentally ill in some way, or they're mentally inadequate in some way.
Yeah, and if people are having those options, they're going to get put into one of those slots. I want to figure out how to get people to go do an Occupy Wall Street, or at least knitting, and not buying a gun and murdering 10 people in a grocery store out of racial hatred.
Right.
I think we just have to, really reform how our country is running, and it's not about taking guns away or changing how people access social media, but instead it's about lifting people up into a better economic situation. That is what we know, that crime is connected to economic problems. So I mean, if people are not feeling like they have opportunity, we see this all around the world. It's not just here in the United States. In certain parts of the world where there are groups like ISIS, we see people that when they don't feel like they have opportunity, they do become extremely radical, well beyond any sort of radicalization we see here in this country. So people can be radicalized very easily if they have nothing else to latch onto, like what Robby is mentioning. And that, I think that is really what we need is more of a discussion of how do we rebuild the middle class? How do we get the American people feeling like there's a future to actually get excited about? That's what we need.
And how do we restore social ties many of which were eroded during for other reasons, but also because of the pandemic, because of the need, or if you think it was a need, to socially distance and to lock down a lot of community ties, neighborly kind of behavior and community events and services fraying or going away, and which puts this, again, it's a small subset of people who are inclined toward antisocial behavior or to violence, who need to be, captured by those resources, those community support, family support, other institutions, so that they don't, fall on the other side of the line and start doing bad things. And that's unfortunately that we let a lot of that lapse, and I think it's part of the problem.
And to your point about antisocial behavior, Kim, another correlation I saw, Crystal Ball talking about this, and I talked about it a little bit on my podcast today with a guest where we unpack some of the issues that are raised by the manifesto, is that there is this correlation between rising crime rates and military interventionism. Our own country fighting, there's a correlation with people coming home from wars and not being able to distinguish what it meant to say that person is the enemy, go and shoot them, that's how you resolve conflict, and what people feel at home. And I do think that there is a certain modeling of conflict resolution that's going on where people really, when you read the manifesto, he feels like he is at war. He feels like there's a national, a global war against the white race, and he's being replaced, and the answer for him is not to figure out how to encourage white people to have more babies if that's your bag. It means literally exterminating other people, doing a genocide against other people because he feels like a genocide is being done against him. And I think that we have to reckon with the particular, noxious nature of that kind of ideology.